Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a totally wild 7th century geopolitical crisis where a massive global superpower war literally collided with a startling ancient prophecy. We're going to map out exactly how the epic clash between the Byzantine and Sassanid Persian empires became inextricably linked to the nascent Muslim community hundreds of miles away in Makkah. It's a fascinating story, so let's get right into it.
Okay, so to really grasp this, we need to picture the desperate, honestly doomed-looking situation the Byzantine Empire was facing starting around the year 602 CE. At this point, the Byzantines, this massive Christian power, were suffering absolutely devastating defeats. They were just getting relentlessly battered by the Zoroastrian Sassanid Persians. It really looked like an empire that had stood for centuries was on the brink of total collapse. The huge question echoing through the ancient world was simply this: could a falling empire of this magnitude actually be saved, or were they literally witnessing the end of an era?
To understand how things got so bad so fast, we have to look at the spark that ignited this world war. In 602 CE, the Byzantine Emperor Maurice was overthrown and murdered by a guy named Phocas. Now, this brutal assassination handed the Sassanid king, Khosrow Parvez, the absolute perfect pretext to declare war. What started out as just an internal Byzantine power struggle rapidly escalated into a full-blown existential crisis for the empire, kicking off a brutal conflict that would completely reshape the map of the Middle East.
Let's walk through this catastrophic timeline because it really shows you the sheer speed of this collapse. In 610 CE, a new emperor, Heraclius, takes the Byzantine throne, desperately hoping to turn things around. But man, the Persian advance was just an unstoppable juggernaut. By 613 CE, Damascus falls. The very next year, 614 CE, they capture Jerusalem. And by 619 CE, the breadbasket of the ancient world, all of Egypt, is under complete Sassanid control. In less than a decade, the once mighty Byzantine Empire was rapidly shrinking into basically nothingness.
Now, the sheer psychological blow of that 614 CE fall of Jerusalem, it cannot be overstated. This wasn't just a loss of territory, it was a profound, deeply personal humiliation. The Persians completely decimated the city. According to the historical sources, 90,000 Christians were massacred, and the Holy Sepulchre was desecrated. And most devastating of all, the True Cross was seized as a war trophy and hauled all the way back to the Persian capital of Ctesiphon. King Khosrow Parvez even famously taunted Emperor Heraclius, openly mocking the power of his god to protect him.
But here is where we see this really fascinating parallel narrative emerge. On the global stage, you've got Byzantine Christians being crushed by Sassanid Zoroastrians. But meanwhile, locally, way down in Makkah, a small, heavily persecuted community of monotheistic Muslims was totally surrounded by polytheist pagans. Because the pagan Arabs sympathized with the polytheistic Persians, they actually rejoiced at the Byzantine defeats. They mercilessly taunted the struggling Muslim community, basically warning them, hey, just as the Christian Byzantines are being vanquished right now, you monotheistic Muslims are going to be wiped out next.
And that brings us to the pivotal years of 615 and 616 CE. Right at the absolute lowest point for the Byzantine Empire, when defeat seemed completely absolute and irreversible, this remarkable text emerges in Mecca. It's known as Surah Ar-Rum, which translates to the Romans, and it forms chapter 30 of the Quran. Amidst this intense backdrop of local persecution and just catastrophic global news, this revelation drops what is essentially a geopolitical bombshell.
Let's look closely at the exact text here. It says, the Romans have been defeated in a nearby land, but following their defeat, they will triumph within a few years. I mean, think about how audacious that statement was at the time. According to the source, this prophecy contained a seemingly impossible prediction. The Romans were thoroughly vanquished, right? Their armies were shattered, their holy relics were stolen. For a text to boldly claim that they would not only survive, but actually turn the tide in triumph, that went against entirely every single geopolitical reality on the ground.
So, the absolutely crucial detail here is this Arabic term used in the prophecy, Bidi Sinin. This isn't just some vague, oh, someday in the distant future kind of thing. It refers to a highly specific window of time ranging from 3 to 9 years. By using this exact phrase, the text effectively started a ticking countdown clock. It set a firm, totally verifiable deadline of 3 to 9 years for this incredibly unlikely prophecy to be tested against harsh historical reality.
But get this, the text actually goes even further, making two simultaneous predictions. Step 1, the Romans would achieve a miraculous military victory against the Persians. Step 2, at that exact same time, the struggling Meccan Muslims would achieve their own significant victory.
The text directly and explicitly linked the global geopolitical fate of the massive Roman Empire with the highly localized fate of the early Muslims. If one happened without the other, or if it all happened outside that strict 3 to 9 year window, the prophecy would fail.
So, with the Byzantine Empire in absolute ruins and a literal countdown clock ticking on this ancient prophecy, we really have to ask, how in the world did the tides of war turn? How was a historical comeback of this magnitude, even mathematically or militarily possible, against an enemy that already controlled Damascus, Jerusalem, and Egypt?
Well, this perfectly illustrates the crazy turning point in the year 622 CE. On the global stage, Emperor Heraclius somehow manages to scrape together a force and launches this desperate counteroffensive against the Persians, starting from Armenia. But locally, simultaneously in 622 CE, the Prophet Muhammad makes his pivotal migration, known as the Hijra, to Medina, escaping the harsh persecution in Mecca. It's incredible. Just as Heraclius finally begins to push back militarily, the Muslim community makes the exact strategic move that ensures their ultimate survival.
And from there, the momentum just builds into this incredible sequence of dual victories that fit precisely within the time frame. In 624 CE, Heraclius destroys a major Zoroastrian fire temple in Azerbaijan. Concurrently, the Muslims achieve their very first decisive military victory against the Makkan polytheists at the Battle of Badr. The dual prophecy was actively unfolding. Then, in 627 CE, the Byzantines absolutely crushed the Sassanids at the Battle of Nineveh. And by 628 CE, the Sassanid king is completely overthrown. The momentum shift was just absolute.
Step by step, the Sassanid collapse played out. First, the original architect of the war, King Khosrow Parvez, is killed in an internal revolt. Second, his successor, Qubad II, immediately sues for peace. Third, all those occupied Roman territories, Syria, Egypt, Palestine, are astonishingly handed right back. And finally, the ultimate symbol of victory. Emperor Heraclius triumphantly travels to Jerusalem to restore the true cross in 628 CE. Against literally all odds, the Byzantine Empire was victorious.
But remember that second part of the prophecy, we can't forget that. In that corresponding year of 628 CE, the Muslims concluded the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. According to the source material, the Quran referred to this specific treaty as a supreme victory for the Muslims, securing their political legitimacy and paving the way for their future success. The Romans had their epic victory, and simultaneously, the Muslims secured theirs, completely fulfilling both conditions laid out years earlier in Makkah.
So what did all of this actually mean for the people living through it? Well, for the early Muslims, as noted in our source, the fulfillment of this prophecy carried immense theological weight. First, it provided critical reassurance and really boosted morale during a period of intense, literal life-threatening persecution. Second, it served as a powerful demonstration of divine knowledge, perfectly predicting an outcome that defied all contemporary geopolitical logic. And third, it highlighted a core belief for their nascent faith, the idea of ultimate divine control over all worldly affairs, no matter how dire the circumstances appeared.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Just look at how beautifully complex history can be. We have a massive geopolitical war between two ancient superpowers and a nascent faith community struggling for survival out in the desert. And somehow, against all odds, their stories became inextricably linked in the pages of history. What can we actually learn from this incredible historical alignment? I think it challenges us to look much closer at the ripple effects of global events, and it reminds us that sometimes history unfolds in ways that absolutely no one, not even emperors, could ever possibly expect. Thanks so much for learning with us today.